Amy, you want to? Okay, we're there.
Okay, I would like to welcome you to the February 24th Hood River White Salmon Bridge Authority meeting. We've got a short meeting today. There's a number of us that are down in Vancouver sitting through the risk workshop with Federal Highways, Kiewit, ODOT, as well as HNTV this afternoon. So we're going to try and make this a kind of an abbreviated meeting. So I'd like to call to order. And with that, again, we have Mike Fox, Arthur Babbitts, Grant Polson, Jake Edwards from Oregon. We have Doug Gibson and Eric Wilson from Washington. We've been told that Marla Keither will be joining us at 3. Unfortunately, we should be done by then.
We just got Ben on too.
Okay, good. So Ben has joined us as well. Okay, is there any modifications and additions to the agenda? As you can see, we've lined through all of the committee reports for this particular meeting.
Yeah, Mike, just I warned Marla that the meeting would be over by 3, so she gave me her issues, and I will pass them along when we get to the
Okay, yep. Good. Okay. Any other mods to the agenda? If not, could I have a motion to adopt the agenda as is?
So moved.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. Approval and or correction of the meeting minutes from the last meeting, February 10th. Do we have any corrections that have been identified? Hearing none, can I have a motion to approve the minutes as is for February 10th?
So moved.
Second? All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Okay, carried. Anybody from the public join us this time? I'm going to assume not. I can't see your board. So I assume nobody's joined us, so we'll move on from there. Executive reports, we'll go through this very quickly. The co-chairs report, we're not going to have any this particular time. We'll hold a little spot for Dan to talk briefly about government relations in the meeting up in Olympia, as well as the snow day we got down in Salem. And that's weather snow days, not another type of snow day. So co-chairs, no report. Project director bridge update. It's in the package. We're going to go ahead and skip through that. Same way with legal. Dan, you're up on government relations.
Thanks, Co-Chair Fox. Dan Marr here, Government Relations Update. As the Co-Chair mentioned, since our last authority meeting, we had lobby days scheduled in both Salem and Olympia. Salem, we had the misfortune of scheduling that on the one snow day of the year where they closed the Capitol for the entire day. So thanks to Jake Edwards and Mike Shannon for driving down there, only to drive back in the snow and slush. Fortunately, they all made it home safely. Olympia, the project co-chairs, myself, Carrie Witt, went up to Olympia this past Thursday. Had a really great round of meetings in the Capitol. Thanks to Brad Boswell and his team for scheduling during a very busy day. Had a few logistical changes that they rolled with. Had a number of great meetings. You know, Co-Chair Fox can add some color commentary if he wishes, but you know, we found great support with our local champions, met with a number of statewide transportation leaders as well. We understand there are some difficult funding dynamics happening in Washington that are still getting fleshed out, but we're definitely on the radar of the folks who make those decisions. So I thought as good of a day in the Capitol as we could have hoped for. Commissioner Fox, am I missing anything?
Yeah, maybe just a slight add. This time around, we didn't ask for any additional funding. We did ask that they put together a commitment for the balance of 125 million, which is 50 million, but that could be paid out in a few years from now. And I think most people we talked to appreciated not getting a request for additional funds this year, other than it's already been programmed, because they have some significant challenges this year and next year.
Yeah, that's right. And that's the point we're at in both states. For a while, we weren't talking at this level of detail of phasing and when the money would actually need to be delivered. But in both states where we've gotten to that point. And so it's good to be, at the table. On the Oregon side, we had expected a framework of the package to be released on Valentine's Day. That's gotten delayed. Here we are 10 days later. We still haven't seen that. I think legislatively, they're just at the tricky point where you have to start talking about revenue mechanisms and how they're going to raise the money to pay for, not just projects, but ODOT's operating revenue. And so talks have slowed down in Salem, but we're continuing to, we're staying involved in those conversations through our lobbyists and working on scheduling a return trip to Salem to do our round of advocacy.
So the last that we heard in a transportation bill, there was going to be 5 projects showcased, and our project was one of the 5. I don't know if we've heard any change to that.
Nothing new. No.
Okay. If we could, let's skip the partners update unless one of the partners has something important that they want to bring up.
Mike. One second. One quick thing on government relations. I am meeting with Governor Ferguson tomorrow on pre-fruit matters. Wonderful. So we can talk offline, but if there's any kind of, I have a very limited amount of time. So if I have like 3 bullet points of boom, 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 that would be appreciated.
I can make sure you have that.
I would strongly encourage you, Doug, to sit down with Dan after the meeting. He's got a pretty good write-up of what took place, but there were some underlying messages that the congressman shared with us that you should hear before you talk to the representative. Okay. So I would encourage you to sit down for 5-10 minutes after this meeting and get that brief.
We'll do. Just want everyone to be aware.
Okay. Is there any of our partners, Federal Highways, ODOT, WashDOT, would like to say something at this time? And I'm going to rely on you guys to tell me whether they raise their hand or not.
No one raised their hand.
Nobody's raising.
Okay, so we're going to proceed on. So that completes the executive reports. Let's move into the consent agenda. Invoice approval for, there's a few of them. If you've had a chance to look at them, it's my understanding that they all have been taken through the budget and funding group and was approved by you folks.
Yep.
And they were shown to the engineering construction team, and we did the same thing. We had no issues with that. So could I have a move to approve the invoices as stated?
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Okay, we're going to skip the committee reports this time. Let's go into new business, and the item is the executive director job description, action plan, and posting advertisement. So what has taken place since the last meeting, the team of Ben, Doug, and myself took a look at the job description at that time. We made a few adjustments to it to reflect what Federal Highways was looking for in the term person in charge. And we revised it for that. We developed an advertisement that could go into trade paper, or we're suggesting posting it on Indeed. And then we also put together a action plan of how do we take where we are today and how do we get it to the point where we could hire an executive director. There was two things we were looking at there. Should we hire them as a permanent new employee? Or should we bring the person on as a contractor? I spent some time with Debbie down at the port. There is a way that we could hire a person permanently and perhaps use some of the criteria or some of the programs, equivalent programs that the port does for their staff. But the more we kind of kicked it around, we could go either way. It may be a little easier to bring them on as a contract hire and provide some allowances in the way of compensation, so that employee could go, or that contractor could go get insurance and those kinds of things, and we wouldn't have to mess with that right now. We're certainly going to have to do that as we bring on permanent staff, and maybe we give this individual the opportunity in the job description to get all of that set up. So as we start hiring permanently, perhaps we roll this individual, assuming they're doing a good job, over to a permanent hire and start adding staff to it. But adding staff, I don't see is going to happen for 2, 3, 4 years from now. But we are required to have this person in charge by federal regulation prior to the time we go into construction. And to me, it kind of makes sense to bring him in a little early, make sure they're involved in 1B negotiations, but really be ready to go into phase 2 negotiations on construction. So that's kind of the thought. So this task list is we're kind of leaning towards doing a contract hire and a bare salary range. I talked to a couple of different people, and I mean, you can spend a whole bunch of money on this person, which we don't have. Or if you look at kind of local bodies of organizations, something like this, it seems like the bare salary range is somewhere between 150 and 210,000.
Commissioner Fox, Arthur has his hand up.
Yeah, Arthur, go ahead, please.
Yeah, you used the term a couple of minutes ago. You talked about 1B negotiations.
Yeah.
And I'm a little confused about what that is compared to the phase 2 negotiations.
Yeah, 1B, theoretically, we should be in it right now.
Right.
And 1B is going into design. But what we're seeing with funding and the Fed upset, getting the 75 million access off the infra grant, we can very easily see that's going to slide to the right a few months. And if it slides to the right a few months, we could have this person in place and be involved in that negotiation. That's all.
And then the second thing, you just discussed the salary range. So presumably that's the salary range for a contractor, not for an employee.
Yep. Okay. Yep. So on top of that salary, we would have to add something for insurance.
Oh, okay. So that's not the salary then.
No, it's the bare salary.
Well, I don't know what bare salaries. I mean, I'm a contractor and I get a salary and I pay my own expenses out of that.
Yeah. I think from what I've heard and who I've talked to, including Carrie Witt, who's on kind of a national level, what I call a skinny bare rate with no benefits, that 150 to 210,000 is probably in the ballpark for this size of a project.
So in other words, really the 150 to 210 is the salary if that person were an employee.
Correct, Arthur.
You're right. but I'm saying if we want to,
No, I understand the whole concept. I just.
yep.
I don't know if we're talking about a number that we're gonna be increasing or decreasing.
I think that's all for negotiation. Is
Yeah.
what we've said.
So what we would like to do, and this team is Doug and Ben and myself, get kind of approval from the board that if we in fact find somebody we think is good, we start the negotiation from that 150 to 210 plus some allowance for benefits. Again, before we cut the deal, it's got to come back to the authority for final approval before we do anything. But we wanted to start in some kind of a ballpark.
Got it.
Yeah, the process would be get board approval on the job description and the ability to post the job and go forward, given the Commissioner Fox's recommendation of the salary range. Once we then publish, we'll collect applications, work within our group to develop a short list, start interviews on that short list, and then come up with a even shorter list of people who we think are final candidates, and keeping the board appraised probably every meeting of our status and our progress. And then finally, when we have our recommended candidate, moving forward with the negotiation subject to board approval.
Yeah, so if you turn to page 26 in your package, it's basically an action plan doing exactly what Doug said. Down through candidate evaluation and an executive session to seek final approval to hire such a person. One thing to note on item number 5 on the task list, this approach basically is lined up with that we get the approval for the advertisement and the job description and the range of salary to start with. We would post that on Indeed. It would be there for a 2-week period, and we see what kind of response we get. If we just don't get a good response, then we can always go back and find I call them a headhunter, to go do a further search for such a person. So we're kind of trying the short, quick way, and if it doesn't work, fallback is to go hire a headhunter, which is going to cost us a little bit of money. This is the cheaper route. So this says that we would come back to you folks on 4/14 with a final recommendation to hire. And again, the team that would be doing the interviewing would be Ben, Doug, and myself. Now, if somebody else wants to take my spot, I'm more than happy to give it up.
That was what I was going to say.
I beat you to it.
So, Mike, I have a question just regarding, FHWA is asking us to have this responsible individual. Does that then mean that the funding that is funneling through FHWA will support this, or is this something that we need to figure out a way to finance long-term?
We're going to have to fund it out of project funds and even more, because there will be a percentage of this individual will be NR. And once we get our overhead rates established, I'm hoping that at least for the first year or two, that overhead component of this person's position will be relatively small, 10%, 15%, something like that. But later on, as we start to develop an organization, we staff organization, we staff and we start defining maintenance procedures and that kind of thing, then that person will swing more and more towards an operational budget, not recovered by grants.
Right. I'm just thinking about where, at any given discussion, we're somewhere between 48 and 60 some odd months before we have any revenue.
Yeah, so the key thing here, and Mike is next to me, there's a requirement that they want this position filled before you start construction. So theoretically, we could hold off for almost a year. But there's so much stuff going on and we're going to have staffing changes. It's probably worth getting that person on board that's going to be here when perhaps the rest of us aren't. And today, since we've started the authority, Mike Shannon has acted somewhat in this position, but so has Jake and myself. And we need to kind of wean Mike off of doing authority work because his workload is going up exponentially as we start moving into design. We keep fussing with permits and get into construction.
Yeah, Mike, I guess I'm not following. Eric, I thought Eric's question was that the overhead, since the overhead can't be paid out of most of the funding sources we have, how are we paying the overhead? And and we don't know that we'll actually be able to proceed to design. We may actually wind up with a design that is sitting on the shelf until such time as funding becomes available. So there may not be revenue in this, 5-year time frame. Revenue could be 15 years down the road. So what's the funding source?
Okay, so for right now, I don't know if you guys heard, but at the last port meeting, we requested and they agreed that they would raise our budget, if you will, for non-reimbursable type stuff like this from 500,000 up to $1 million.
Okay.
And the paper is working through to do that. The other thing they've agreed to is to allow us to access that toll revenue reserve, a little over 5 million right now. We can use that as an interim to pay bills before we get reimbursed through the grants.
Well, but we haven't approved that as a board.
Correct. No, we still have to approve it, but that vehicle is going to be available to us.
Well, but we promised the public something different on that. So that's a pretty serious discussion.
And I agree. But we were in a world of hurt if we didn't have this ability.
I get that, but that is quite different. Let me pass along. Kevin Greenwood asked me to ask, when do we get our overhead rate? When is that expected?
So we are getting proposals coming in next week, and evaluation panel members, including Commissioner Paulson and Commissioner Berger and Debbie.
Yeah, the question that he's asked is, we're going out to get a contractor to help us establish this overhead rate.
Right, but
that
when will
contract we expect to award by when?
End of March.
Okay, by the end of March, and then when do we expect them to give us the rate that we can seek approval on?
It has to be sorted out with a consultant who's going to do it. Debbie might have a better idea how long it's going to take, and we were expecting about a few months.
Yeah, personally, based on my experience, it shouldn't be more than 2 or 3 months.
Yeah.
Okay, I have a bunch of other things, but I see Marla got online. I was going to pass along her issues also. So if we could hear Marla, and then I have some issues after she's done.
Sure.
Hi, Arthur. Thanks, guys. I guess a few questions, and just on the heels, this wasn't my first question, but now that we're talking about funding, yeah, I would just say I have serious concerns and reservations about this being the correct time for us to be pushing this forward. I think the optics into the community are a little tough for me to get behind in terms of this funding's not coming in. We know that there are a lot of concerns right now about the security of the funding we still need. And this feels a bit risky for us to be taking on a salaried staff position for the authority. It seems like the trigger for this is something that is down the road. And if there's reference to this could be something done in a year, I think we should just have some caution on how quickly we're proceeding with this. And then I might have missed this earlier, and I saw it was only referenced as salary commensurate with experience. But I would say in this day and age, in this job market, we would, I think, be benefiting by doing a salary survey of other local agencies in the area to evaluate what they're paying either a city administrator, county executive, or executive director, so that we've got some substance to where we're setting this job, especially knowing we don't have active revenue as a governing body right now. And then the other thing I would just throw out for consideration, I appreciate that right now we're delegating this work to a subcommittee. But since this would be the first staff position, I would strongly recommend that the seated 6 commissioners be the interview board, and that is how it is moving its way forward. I think right now the subcommittee would have 2 of the seen voting members of the authority. The way this was set up in Oregon was much more structured than Washington, but at the end of the day, we are 6 voting members and 6 alternates. So I think we should have clarity on who is really going to be involved. And so that if we are giving a recommendation to the larger board, if they're not in the interview, it seems like it's more than just a minority. I think those are my main thoughts. The other thing I throw out for consideration, other agencies, when they're hiring a county executive or city manager, they will often have part of that hiring process be a community meeting opportunity. And we know the history in our communities with the government agency that's overseen a bridge. And I think this could be an opportunity when we are ready to make it clear how we prioritize the relationship into the community and allow the public who may want to participate to have a chance to meet the final candidates as well.
Marla, you left one out of the list you gave me to deliver. So can I remind you?
Oh, well, thanks. Yeah, I'll throw it back to you.
In terms of, I have a bunch of my own issues too, but from your issue, you had, in terms of job description, that you wanted to include something that said that it should be someone who has delivered a project of this sort before, maybe not of this scale, but a project of this sort. So as opposed to hiring someone simply with, the description is kind of a general administrator, and you're imagining that the description would be someone who has been an administrator on a project delivering a large capital object. Is that a fair statement to what you asked me to deliver?
Yeah, yes, thank you. And I do think back to the recruiting, there are a lot of different job sites and targets, and I think we could build out that list even further, but I think this is an opportunity for us to extend the net broadly. And I think we would benefit by bringing in outside experience and someone that's delivered a project for a different agency, potentially from a different part of the country or a different region. I think at this critical point of the project, sometimes you can become a victim of groupthink, or a lot of hands have touched this project at this point. And I think we've got a lot of strong people that have been a part of this team, but I would love to see us genuinely be looking for someone that's coming with some qualifications that signal experience.
I would just caution us, and we do what the board wants to do. If you're going for somebody that's got $1 billion project experience, we're going to pay a lot more than 150 to 210,000.
Yeah, but I think that's why I think the words were of this kind, not necessarily this scope. So getting someone who's delivered a $50 million project means that they at least understand delivering a capital project, as opposed to getting someone who's been, administrator for an agency that
that I totally agree with.
Water utility rates or something. Yeah. So
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, go for it, Arthur. Sorry, didn't mean to cut you
Yeah,
off.
sorry, Doug. And so, Doug, we actually had a chance to talk about this a little bit at our committee meeting a couple of weeks ago. And I remain concerned about the timing of this. And I get the idea that it will take some time to advertise and to find a person and to get a person on board. But I guess so. More than 6 months before the election, I started raising concerns that it's possible that we enter into a circumstance where we're simply unable to move forward with building a bridge in the immediate timeframe. And I remember asking in a meeting, is even the 200 million guaranteed, the 200 million infra guaranteed, and our lobbyists said, well, it would be unprecedented to for it not to come through. It's been appropriated, not obligated, but it would be unprecedented for it to not come through. And now we know that we're in a world where some pretty unprecedented things are happening. And I don't have a lot of trouble imagining that the 200 million simply will be held in some purgatory for possibly several years, which I understand that we do have a pathway to complete the design of the bridge without that 200 million, but that clearly puts us in a situation where we're not moving forward into a construction phase. And I'm, I guess, I've hired for positions like this before, and you don't get good people when they can smell the possibility of the project going the wrong way, and the people you get are your second and third string who are looking for a job. The good people are kind of wanting to sign on with a project that's actually funded and it's going to happen. And so I'm not sure that, I guess, I'm pretty queasy about proceeding with this before we know that at least the infra funds will be obligated. And I'm not, maybe I should just stop there. Without clarity on the obligation of the infra funds, I can easily see that we may be stuck in a design only project, and I don't feel this is necessary for getting 1B done. I don't feel this is necessary. And I would probably delay this until I was sure that 1B was going to lead into a 2.
We can certainly kind of chair this and bring it back when we have more of a full commission to consider this.
I mean, in a month, we may know more, right?
Myself,
I think, I think that we're missing one element of this, and I don't have all of the details. And Arthur, you were there when we were discussing this, but there's a substantial amount of saving. I heard there's lack of revenue. There's also a substantial amount of cost savings that we identified that this person would be delivering and would be a requirement of this person to deliver. Communication savings, project management savings. In initial discussions, that was kind of first and foremost is the biggest driver for having that person on earlier rather than later. I do understand the requirement phase for the person, but kind of from my initial discussions, that was the impetus to have this person on earlier.
I don't remember that we had actual numbers. Did we? Oh, I'm sorry. I've had a lot happen between now and then. So
no, we didn't have it, and I didn't have the actual numbers. It was more we spent this on all the different groups. We spent this on communication, this on social media, and this on lobbying activities and different things. And we're hoping to reduce that overall consultant number that we felt was slightly inflated.
Yeah,
Right.
I think the next best exercise there, I would love to see that breakdown evaluation of what shifts from the owner's rep to this executive director position, because everything, whether it's the comms or another category, is all seen as, well, we hired an owner's rep. And so I think to be responsible in that consideration, we should really be getting that analysis, because that can be misleading without numbers next to it of what the gain really is, because that is a different skill set higher than what we were talking about earlier between Arthur and I about wanting to see someone that's really delivered projects and has that experience. And to me, the cost savings and that implication of that being a key qualifier for this job position is we should be seeing cost savings across other line items that are currently fall under the owner's rep.
And more so, just to build on that, we know we have qualified people who, and we have a known entity, an expensive known entity, but a known entity in our owner's rep. If we proceed with going down this path with a risky project that I, just flat out, I don't expect we're going to get top candidates given the level of risk on the project today, then I'm not so sure that we're saving money by bringing in someone who's not as qualified as the folks that we're getting now through HNTB.
You don't know the quality of the applicants until you actually put out a listing.
Well, I've
We
gone
just won't
through,
know that.
yeah, I know, but I mean, I've gone through 2 hirings in the past year or so, and I do know the pool of people that's out there, and there's a large pool of people who will jump at anything, and a very small pool of very qualified people who are looking for a job that's actually going to be a future for them.
Likewise.
And but is your experience different? I mean, have you seen that with a project with this big question mark over its head, you're still thinking? I mean, I guess there's a bunch of federal employees that have recently been laid off. I have 3 neighbors who've been laid off in the last week. But are you?
I think, yeah, there's federal employees everywhere that are looking for jobs, and especially one that has just kind of a high profile one. Additionally, I recently, granted it was 6 months ago, did a hire similar public sector for the U.S. Pear Bureau. I mean, we were fully having discussions about the U.S. Pear Bureau being canned while this person was applying for the job. The person we ended up getting is fantastic and happens to be in that 150 to 200 price range. Able to do comms, but acts as a CEO level. So again, bad experiences, good experience. You don't know where you're going to fall until you kind of push off the ledge and see if it flies. So I think Marla's points on analysis of cost savings is a very good point. I also think that we have conflicting statements between we want someone that's run a $50 million plus project, and we want to do a local community government survey analysis. So they probably aren't seeing eye to eye. But I think the cost savings is a good place to start. Getting consensus on the job description is also a good place for our group to land. If we need to add a line item that says, hey, experiences in these 20 different things, we can add it. Who knows what you get when the candidates come by? It might be someone that is fantastic, that has experience, that has no college experience. But we think they're the best candidate. Who knows? So.
Yeah. Go ahead.
What I heard, what I would like to do, if it's cool, now that we have a more fleshed out job description and some more details, is, as Commissioner Keithler mentioned, go through and do more analysis on the financial side to evaluate the ramifications of this position a bit more. In the past, it's been soft. And actually apply some more numbers to it. What that would mean is it would push this schedule out a little bit in terms of the timeline, which is fine. I think we have time to do that. We have time to push this timeline out a bit. However, if we as an organization are going to have our own organization and work as an organization, I still think it makes sense for us to have our people structurally. It builds our own institutional muscle and that sort of thing. So that's I would like to, as we talked about in the past, take on that financial analysis responsibility in my little group, and hopefully bring that back. If I can work with staff and get it done in a month, hopefully less, that'd be great.
Sorry. There's one other thing.
That also gets us time to get our contractor in place, to get our overhead rate more in place, to make sure it fits, this position fits more with our grant funding sources and other source of funds to make sure that the position fits with everything else that we have in our structure.
One other thing for consideration, and I agree, I like the idea of waiting a little bit, doing a little bit more study. Because we do have some time here. One reason why I'm supportive of going and getting an executive director, be it now or 6 months, 7 months, 8 months from now, is that realistically, I think we have a high probability on this project that we're not going to go into construction in 26. We could very easily not go into construction in 27. But what we ought to be focused on now is getting through design with a constructible design, and we're ready to go out for bid or with Kiewit if and when we ever get the funds. So with that in mind, I think realistically, we're probably going to lose some commissioners. And with Mike, who has been kind of acting as our executive director, if this project goes out 5, 6, 7, 8 years from now, I honestly believe Mike's company is going to want to pull him to go do other work. And if that's the case, we have no permanent staff to basically watch over this project. We're relying on a HNTB owner's contract with less of us folks watching over it. That's my concern. I think we got to get
A valid concern, but I think as commissioners that are tasked with building the bridge, we should be proceeding as if we are going to get the funding, as we're going to build the bridge.
So
Commissioner
I
Babbitt has his hand up.
don't think, I think I agreed with everything, except I want to talk to Doug a little bit more about that last comment. So here, let me just explain what I mean. I think Grant's point, I think, is really hard. It would be hard to argue if we see that this is a cheaper way to get to the end of phase 1B than proceeding as we are with HNTB owner's rep doing all this work. Then I would not have a leg to stand on to say, yeah, but let's not do it anyway. So number one, I agree that if we have economic data, if we have financial data that says that this is cheaper, yep, argument is silly. I'm done. The second part, though, is I think we do need to spend some time gaming out the options for the project, presuming that we don't have the ability to proceed directly to phase 2. And I need to have a better understanding of what those paths would look like so we can optimize for them before I'm willing to say, I mean, you can go forward. I know Commissioner Fox likes to say failure is not an option. And I understand all of the powers to positive thinking. That said, I think it's our obligation to game contingencies. And I'm sure that you're all doing that in your head. And I'd like us to, as a board, do it in a public way so that we're a little bit more transparent and people don't think that we're just kind of delusional people who are presuming that even though, you know, just in one world where impoundment is a real thing and no federal dollars are being spent, no matter how much they're appropriated, I don't know that the public is going to take us very seriously if we say, oh, well, we're still going to build a bridge, we're still moving forward. So I do want to have that discussion. I'm wondering if with Dan there, I'm wondering if Dan can say anything to what the time frame, you know, is there any hints you're getting as to what the time frame is for us to get some degree of visibility into the infra funds at a minimum, the potential to obligate the infra funds?
Unfortunately, we don't have any new information on that. I mean, you know, it's same as it was 2 weeks ago. I mean, Duffy was confirmed as DOT secretary. It's a good sign. They've placed a few other political leaders within the agency, but so far it's been completely mum relating to the agreement process, right, or the bridge investment process for that matter.
So I like the idea that Grant suggested of tabling this for a month and looking again next month to see if Grant has managed to come forward with some numbers. And Grant, you can scream if you don't think 4 weeks is enough, but I like that idea. And I would also like us to have a discussion in 4 weeks about what it looks like, not necessarily have the discussion, but to discuss what it looks like to talk about contingencies. Because there are different ways you can approach that, and I'm hoping we can actually talk about that.
A lot of the contingencies, I think some of that is going to be coming out of what's going on right now in Vancouver with the risk workshop.
I expect that, yeah.
So we'll I think we'll get a lot of that information.
So I think we'll be a lot smarter next month, and
Yeah.
I propose that we table this table this discussion until next month.
Anybody opposed to doing that?
Jake has something to say.
Yeah, Jake?
I said a comment about the position description. I think there's two little very minor things that sort of I was hoping to see. That is that the ED is not a voting member of the board. Now that's probably pretty obvious, but it's not stated. And that a current bridge board member cannot also be the executive director. Now, I don't think that necessarily has to go in the position description, but our current bylaws for section 3.1 executive director don't spell that out. So I think maybe we can make some modifications to the bylaws.
I thought that the bylaws said someplace that a board member can't be an employee of the organization. Do we not have that? You don't see that?
Section 3.1 says the board shall employ or retain an executive director who shall be the chief administrative officer of the authority and perform the duties and exercise the powers conferred upon the executive director by the charter and such additional duties and powers as may be authorized by the board.
Okay. Well, certainly if we don't have that in writing, I agree with you. And I think Mark Gardner could help us with that to make sure that we're covered for that.
So could we
Thanks.
assign
Good
that
sense.
to the governance committee to work through Mark and get that added or
You
corrected?
can. And thank you, Jake, for catching that.
I think we have a running kind of list of things to look at in the bylaws, so we can add that.
Thanks,
Okay.
Mark.
Thank you. Okay. Any other discussion on the executive director action? Okay, if we could, everybody's got the financial report. Let you read it yourself. We have to get back into this risk workshop. So if it's okay with everybody, we'll go ahead and close out the meeting.
Oh, just one, I'm sorry, just one other thing, which maybe is to add to Mark's list. It's my recollection that interviewing a executive director is something that would be something that the board could do in executive session. Presumably we wanted to take Marla's advice that the entire board be involved in the interview process. So Mark, if you could just verify that for our next meeting, that would be helpful.
I was also wondering, I know the people at the risk workshop need to go, but it looks like we've got enough commissioners on Zoom and in the conference room. I would love to just get an update or a readout from Dan regarding the recent meetings in Olympia and I believe also Salem, unless those were fully canceled due to weather. And then usually end with discussion for the good of the order. So if anyone, if the other commissioners on board would like to keep going, I have this full time blocked off. So we can
just for reference, Dan did a really good report about what happened up in Olympia.
Great.
So,
and then hopefully I'll catch an end of it. And I think we can still, if there's any other updates from the other commissioners, we can let you guys get back to the risk workshop.
I'm going to go ahead and sign off. Jake's in the meeting. So thank you. And we'll put this executive director on hold for a month as we work through a couple of the issues.
And thanks for your work on this.
You bet. Take care, guys.
Bye-bye.
Closing the meeting.
Well, I just
Okay.
wanted to, hold on, I'm trying to get back to the irregular agenda, which I think we've got it. And I don't
We already
know.
reviewed that, right? Okay.
Oh,
Go for it, Ron.
so on just some of these upcoming action items, I don't know if staff there could give us insight, but is there anything that's tentatively getting a time frame of when it'll be coming before us? Like
I
the,
don't have it. I don't have any updates. I don't know if Tahi does, but I don't know. He's signed off. Oh, there he is.
Sorry, I
yeah,
missed
maybe
the
some of these different
question.
policies that have been flagged to come to us for discussion or the right of way movement. And then I did just have a question regarding like the raise funding or just some of these other things that are getting into motion or are underway. Like what, as the commissioners, do we need to know about anything that could be changing timing wise? Because as Arthur alluded to, I think anyone receiving federal funds right now needs to be diligent in keeping on top of and understanding when our project could, or if it already is being affected.
So for the raise grant, Marla, we have submitted a reimbursement. The question on that we had was whether or not the reimbursement process would continue. I don't think we've heard back yet on what we've submitted. So
No.
we're waiting to see. We have slowed down the raise work just because we don't want to be spending money that we can't get reimbursement for. So it hasn't fully stopped, but we've slowed it down just to see how this first reimbursement request goes. And then once we see if they're continuing to pay us and it's continuing to, the money's continuing to flow, then we'll continue the raise work as it's been kind of scheduled to go. But we did do a slight slowdown on that just to be cautious about spending, any more than we had to until we know that we're going to be able to get reimbursed. Because that agreement has been signed and everything, we think we're okay, but we weren't sure if they were going to shut Delphi down and how far they were going to go. So we're kind of testing the waters to see how this reimbursement goes.
Yeah, we are monitoring that system almost every day if it's shutting down because we have to wait a little bit to submit the next request because it has to come with a payment made to somebody. So we are waiting for the Washington money come through to pay some of the work done, and using that as a proof of payment, we'll submit next package to raise. But like I said, we don't hear anything since we submitted.
When did we submit on that? It's been over a week.
Yeah, it's been like a two weeks at least.
Yeah, so it's probably a little slower than it was in the past. So we'll see. Has it moved from the previous status to the?
No, it's still just pending.
So we actually Tom Goldstein with FHWA, who's the grant administrator for the Oregon Division, is here. So we will try to catch him before he leaves today and see if we can find out if he knows anything on the raise part. He's the one on first step kind of for FHWA to push that through. So we'll see what he's hearing.
And then just, I guess generally, I know in either at the end of the year or at the start of this year, there was discussion as we are getting into a period of tight fund availability. I'm just wondering if you can give an information to the board, and maybe this is made to the finance committee, but in terms of our standing with anyone that's doing work on behalf of this project, are they paid or what is that? Are you seeing effects to subs that might be under HNTB or payments to HNTB for work that's also getting slowed down? And should we be mindful of that so that we are not unnecessarily burdening either subs or HNTB on this project?
Yeah, and I'll start and T can provide some details, but yeah, I mean, the last 3 months has been painful. We've been working with WashDOT to get through their reimbursement process. So people are approaching 90 days, maybe even a little more for some of our subs of being paid. So that was one of the reasons in asking for or looking at an option to increase some of the money with the port. And access to that 5 million would give the authority an option, and this to be taken into consideration when you guys kind of vote on this. That would give you a revolving credit cash flow that would allow you to pay your bills within, a 30-day time period, and then get the reimbursement back to that money. So you would only use that for fully reimbursable expenses. But it would allow you that opportunity to pay folks so they weren't sitting. We did just last week get approval from WashDOT on the 2 of the invoices packages that we submitted to them, which will bring in 7 million.
9 million total. We have an outstanding package to WashDOT that's totaling $9 million, and we got the approval last week, almost $5 million. And we are expecting that to come through and get dispersed to authority within a week or so. They said a maximum 8 days, and like Mike said, it was approved. I believe it's Thursday or Wednesday. So hopefully by the end of this week, we get the money, and we've been informing ourselves about the situation, and we hope that we can make a payment to them right after we get the money. We are looking for the expedited process to disperse their payment right away once HNTV receives the fund.
I'm sorry, we typically pay within 10 days of us receiving the money, and we're looking internally if we can make that a little faster than that, just so because people have been waiting so long.
Which payment source is this?
The WashDOT 5187.
Okay.
The $15 million grant that we have from WashDOT.
I'm sorry,
which is non-federal money.
Right. That's what I was trying to verify. It's not federal money, so at least we don't have this big federal question there. I'm sorry. So why is this not there? Is it just simply a Washington bureaucracy issue?
Yes. Yeah, pretty much. It's just trying to check all the boxes that WashDOT wants to check in order to validate costs and validate hours charged and expenses and things that FHWA would have accepted and have accepted. They're going above and beyond. So we think we've got it to a point. We had to implement a few new processes and some new things up on the front end to make sure that things were clean from everybody coming through, and just additional information they wanted to see.
I understand your argument. I understand your argument for using the bridge toll fund to do that. It is an extraordinary thing. I'd be quite uncomfortable unless it was something that could be 100% described as a cash flow issue. If there's, it's one thing when you have, a common, a common pool, common cash pool. In this case, this is really clearly segregated funds.
And your first line for paying your bills is your ARPA grant, which is basically cash on hand. You have about $4.5 million. Well, you should have, when we get reimbursement, $4.5 million in that account that you can use as a revolving line of credit, because that money has already been given to us.
But that's
it has to be expended by the end of 2026. That's the expiration date on it. So for the next 2 years, and primarily through potentially all of 1B, you will be able to use that as your primary funding source to be able to make your payments. And then when you get reimbursement, you will just replenish that ARPA fund, which is what we've been doing since we received the ARPA funds. That's what the port did with it. That's what we were using it for. What happened was, in the time period of us getting access to the 15 million and getting reimbursement, we ended up having to use that ARPA money and had to use it up and didn't get reimbursement in time to replenish that money. So as soon as we get this WashDOT money, it'll reimburse that. What we set the two primary contracts, HNTBs and PWITs.
You got to hold for a second, because you keep talking without a chance to figure out what we're talking about precisely.
Okay.
The ARPA funds are funds that are a federal source but are sitting as cash because we've already received those from the federal government. The replenishment is from a state source. So the state source is not at risk, but is being extra picky at this time. Okay.
That is correct.
Is that where we are?
Sorry.
Okay.
Yes.
And so I think everyone needs to appreciate that. And then based on that, needs to consider.
I have an ARPA question.
Yeah.
Just knowing that this authority wasn't even established when ARPA funds were enacted by the federal government and given to all the agencies, Were our ARPA funds dedicated or given from Hood River County or Clickitat County? What's their origin? From which agency?
The ARPA
Port.
funds came through through ODOT to the Port of Hood River for this
They're-
project. Their port money.
Okay, so it's state ARPA dollars.
With this project in mind, the state
Correct.
knew that we were doing this and gave the
Thank
port
you.
money to hold for us for this,
Okay.
as we were forming the agency.
And that is one source of funding that we were not able to change the ownership of. The ownership of that money or receiving agency for ARPA is the port.
So I think, yeah, we will have to have a discussion about how we all feel about touching those very segregated funds for this purpose. It sounds like that may be something that comes up next month.
Yeah, and what I was trying to say
a good
was
argument.
that would be backup to the ARPA,
yeah.
which should be less chance during phase 1B, in the way we've kind of established the monthly billings. It will be contingent on WashDOT being able to, and us being able to process our invoice reimbursements in a timely manner to be able to replenish that ARPA fund.
So is that ARPA fund still an ARPA fund once you've spent it and then replenish it, or does it then translate into bridge money?
No,
No.
and Debbie, you can correct me on this one, but it stays ARPA money because we're not actually submitting it to ARPA or documenting it as being spent ARPA
Right.
money. We're using it as a cash funding source.
That's good. Stop there. And then, so then my second question kind of goes back to Arthur talking about how we get into, or if we get into the toll money. And I think one of the things there that we probably need to spend some time with is there are at least 6 of us, perhaps more, on the authority that were not around when that was being done and when those promises were being made. So you kind of brought that up and it kind of triggered the message or memory to me, but in my mind, I didn't promise anybody anything. So yeah, if that keeps the cash going, keeps the project moving, sounds great. But so I think there needs to be a little bit of an education thing so that we're all kind of coming at that from the same context.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, and I know I can date it very specifically because I know I was driving my car through Grants Pass talking to Christy Chapman, who was very concerned about the nature of this commitment. So that would be last April. And I'm sorry, no, it was earlier than that. But
A couple years ago.
Yeah, it was a while ago.
Time's moving fast.
It was a while ago, but it was a very emotional discussion. And I think it will continue to be an emotional subject. And those of you who arrived after that need to appreciate, I'd like to help you appreciate what the emotions are about.
I think that's going to be essential to have a productive, balanced discussion.
Yep.
And Arthur, I didn't get to sit through it. Were you on the port meeting last Tuesday? Because my understanding was this was it was a discussion point at the port meeting last Tuesday.
No, I think Kevin is online. So Kevin, can you, are you able to jump in, Kevin?
Hey, good afternoon.
Yeah.
Well, I was there, yes. And the staff did recommend that the commission approve access to the TIFIA Reserve Fund, which is just under $5 million, to be used as a line of credit for reimbursable expenses associated with the project. And they also went along with a $500,000 increase in a loan from the port's bridge operations fund for non-reimbursable expenses. Though I have to say, I don't recall an executive director position being spoken to directly during that. It was primarily about lobbying costs and some of the overhead costs generally. Debbie, do you remember anything aside from that?
Debbie, you are muted.
Yeah, I can't hear you, Debbie. Are you back to the Mickey Mouse voice?
I think she agreed with me.
She hasn't had the Mickey Mouse voice for a long
I don't know
time.
if it's a good sign that she physically left the room.
She's in here now. Debbie, is there anything else that you?
No, that
This
sounds
is
like
blurry.
what I recall as well. And I've been working on some a draft
Rob Watman has his hand up.
that I've sent off and actually sent it to the court's attorney and also to Mark Greeno. And so we've been working on that. The idea is that it would be totally contingent exactly on these things being reimbursed and that the money would go immediately back into the LGIP account just as soon as it's received. And I do have signing authority on all the accounts, and I do really document everything, but yes, it's the intention that it will be immediately reimbursed as soon as funds are available.
You got ODOT, Rob Watman has his hand up.
Yep.
I just wanted to ask about the ARPA, just since I have the agreement open. There are reporting requirements that hopefully you guys have been sending that stuff to ODOT, to the contact person.
Yep.
I'm out of the loop on that, so I just want to make sure that's, because there's an April 5th, April deadline, something about overhead stuff. So
We have to do quarterly reports, and yeah,
okay.
those have all been submitted, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, we stay in contact. It's Tammy Wise.
Rob, if you don't mind. Oh, sorry, Debbie, you're far enough away from the mic, you keep cutting out.
That's amazing because my voice is really loud.
I could hear her.
Okay, good.
Yeah, Tammy, that's who. So, okay, good.
Yep. We've been sending our reports every time.
Rob, since we have you, if you got another second, have you heard anything on the STIP, or can you give us a status update of where we are on the STIP update?
I don't have anything other than from the last time, it was in the process where it was, going through probably the public comment type period. We just got an email that anything that has to have federal highway approval, so oftentimes these STIP amendments need federal highway approval. All approvals are now going to headquarters in DC. So it's just gonna take longer. That's all we have. That's all they said. It's just gonna take longer. I mean, we don't have any idea if it's a week or a month or who knows.
Okay. And do you have any kind of date on when you're gonna be ready to send that out to feds for their approval, or?
I don't know if it already is or isn't out for approval. I haven't seen anything, so I can check. If I find anything out, I'll let you know.
Yeah, just shoot me an email if you know whether, or just let me know when it goes to the feds for their approval. Just we'll provide an update if you want.
Yeah, I mean, it's in our actual process, so I have an automated, so wherever that is, I don't get the updates until something happens, so.
Okay.
It's in the queue. And that was January 27th was the last update I had. So.
Are we done?
Anything else? Nothing else? All right, since nobody else here, I'm going to adjourn the meeting.
Okay.
Done.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.